Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Unlearn with Bianca. Today on the podcast, I'm very lucky to have Jin Ong. Welcome, Jin.
Hi, Bianca. I'm so excited to reconnect with you after all these years.
I know it's been a while. I was just saying to Jin, I think Jin's podcast, The Art of Listening to Your Body, was the first podcast that I was a guest on all the way back in around 2020. So it's been a long time.
Yeah, and I've been following your journey and I've been watching your evolution, and it's just so cool. So thank you for inviting me.
Oh, thank you, Jin. Jin is a pattern hunter and a messenger of truth. With roots in osteopathy, acupuncture, and herbalism, she has worked with thousands of clients experiencing chronic illness and complex health issues resistant to conventional or alternative treatments. Now she guides people to unlock the emotional codes within their bodies so that they can expand their capacity, reclaim their power, and create a life beyond limitations. The wisdom she shares is woven through her story and the profound transformations of those who have walked this path. Visionary and creator of the release process and a host of the Art of Listening to Your Body podcast. Oh, that's a big intro. Got a bit tongue-tied there. That encapsulates all the work you do so well. So excited to get into it. As you guys can hear, Jin is passionate about the mind-body connection, just like I am. And I just find her work super fascinating. Been following her journey very closely as well. So, Jen, do you just want to start by introducing yourself and what has led you into this realm?
Sure. Well, that's my most recent upgraded introduction for myself. And I just feel like I keep on evolving. And, once upon a time, I would call myself a psychosomatic therapist, an emotional release therapist. I was an osteopath once upon a time and all of those things. And then a medical intuitive. And I'm like, gosh, it's actually just the story and it's the experience. And I really want to encourage people not to work with people just because of their title or their
Mm,
qualification, but choosing people because they are a match. So, yeah, what do I do now is, well, I transitioned from having a bricks and mortar clinic and working with clients as an osteo one-to-one into the online space during the pandemic. And it kind of felt like that leap came from a place of need, but I'm so grateful that I had this intuitive hit that I wanted to express to the world about how your mind and your body is connected and actually really delve deeper into emotions, not just the superficial awareness of, but
mm,
actually helping people process their emotions and knowing that everything that happens to us, but is actually for us, and all the experiences, not just our physical body pain, is it holds a message. And those are the messages for us to decipher that help us step forwards in our life. And it is about moving away from pain and ultimately creating a life full of pleasure for yourself.
absolutely. I love that. I just feel like our values and our work are so aligned. So, I'm really curious to understand more about the transition you made from traditional osteopathy into this intuitive hit and really getting into the emotional side of the mind body connection. How did that work for you?
Mm. It was definitely a transition over a period of years. So I became an osteopath in 2008, and I used to get really amazing results with people, but I say that it's just those handful of people, the very small percentage where you're like, why did this not work? Like, we did everything to the T, the protocols, the way the textbooks say it should work. It works for everyone else. Why didn't it work for this person? And those people always got me curious. And I would get a little bit down about my work as well. And so, of course, on a mission to help my patients, I would go and do courses and learning. And there was one particular course that I went on, it was just 10 days. And oh gosh, actually, I learned so much about myself. And I realized that as a practitioner, that sometimes we can limit what is possible for our clients based on our own experiences and what we have been witness to, even stories. And so, in an effort to help my clients, I helped myself. And I now see that when we work on ourselves, that's where everything responds around us. So, I actually had a little bit of a health crisis over a decade ago, and that presented in the form of severe cystic acne. I started to get sick all the time with colds and fevers. I had a pain in my neck and shoulder, a minor injury that just kept on getting worse because I was really trying to do too much to it rather than just leaving it alone. And I got an ulcer on my eye. I ended up triggering an autoimmune condition in my joints. I had bilateral ankle stiffness, which is not a good sign. And I got very controlling and on the fix it pathway of restricting my diet, of seeing all of these practitioners, even though they were natural, leaning into stuff that I knew wasn't that healthy for me, like chemical peels on my skin until my face would fall off. And all
Mhm,
these
mhm.
things that
I've been
help.
there.
Yeah,
I've had acne and I've been there too.
yeah, right.
Mhm.
And, this acne that I had was worse than what I had ever had in my teenage years or in my early 20s. And I was mid 20s, so I really felt like my hormones should have settled down by now.
I
And it's just
know.
like, what's going on? And actually, I loved my job. I had amazing friends. I was earning good money. I was living between Australia and New Zealand. So I couldn't work out what the stress was. And I just didn't feel it mentally. But obviously, my body was telling me something. And it was actually at this course that I did that I realized it confirmed for me that I could see what was going on in my patients' bodies, like the ones that all the typical stuff wouldn't work. And I found it so painful because I felt like it was out of my scope of practice to be able to speak to them and ask them about their relationships unless they volunteered to share this in a session. I think most physical therapists who are open to the emotional aspect, they say that their patients say or their clients say, you're like my counselor. I just get so much out of
Mhm.
talking to you because you actually listen to me. But it was through that painful experience that led me to processing my own emotions because the way I was living life, the amount of money I was spending to try and keep my body healthy was not sustainable. And through whatever led me down that pathway, I got these messages of you can intuitively see the emotions that are stuck in your clients' bodies that are responsible for their undesirable manifestations, not just physically, but how their life was playing out, their jobs, their relationships, and so on. Like, why were they attracting all of these challenges? And I just realized, oh my gosh, I've tried all of the things. I, of course, didn't try everything. It was like what I knew at the time. And I just came to the conclusion after a few years, like I went and had a baby, I went and off and did meditation and everything. I came to the conclusion that, oh my gosh, this is like the only thing I haven't tried to actually start speaking about this truth. Like I
Mhm.
did it with select people where I felt like I had the opening. And then it's like, I just need to say this to everyone, whether or not they're ready to hear it or not.
I love that. Especially before this, these sort of, I'm sure there were people talking about it, but I feel like it's a lot more becoming more recognized. So I admire your courage in doing that and just making that jump to speak on it.
Yeah, thank you. And it's actually what really turned my health around. And that I stepped into creating my osteo clinic and speaking this way and then building a team. And it was always my underlying thing. And, it was the pandemic that out of fear drove me into the online space, but it was something that I'd always been hanging on to, waiting for the space, the right time. And it's like, I've been coaching a lot on this recently. It's like, hey, the space doesn't just appear. We create it, we make it happen. And I think that for me, what I've recognized, whether or not you're in the online space or whatever purpose or vision you have, it requires you to step out and be seen and be visible and get over the fears of criticism and judgment. And yeah, it's been a whole evolution that started quite a while ago, but I stalled on the messages. I didn't listen to them because I was trying to find another easier way.
I've been there and still moving through that, but it's interesting how once you find momentum and you start to see shifts energetically and the people that come towards you, you gain that self-trust and that momentum continues. So yeah, I've been watching your transformation, like I said earlier, very closely, and it always inspires me. As you know, I start to find my voice as well. I just want to go back to that thing you said around intuitively being able to see where people were stuck within their body. Was that just a knowing that that person, it's an emotional block, or could you actually sort of see areas of the body? Like, how did that look for you, if you're open to sharing?
Oh, absolutely. That's a really good question because I'm not claiming to be psychic, but there's psychics that can smell things, or they have words land, or spirits talk through them. So again, it's just like, okay, what's the professional, the person you're seeing, and how is it that they channel this stuff? So for me, it is hearing people's story. So I can look at them visually and get a little bit of an idea, but it's really through the words that they speak, the subconscious language, seeing beyond the story that they're sharing and the way their body is presenting. But of course, it goes beyond the physical body, because I was someone that, yes, when I had that crisis, I was getting physical issues, mainly skin, but I'm not someone who experienced a lot of physical pain. My body was really yelling at me back then.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some people where they're absolutely fine physically, but they're just like, life is not working out. So I hear people when they talk about the challenges. And as I said, I'm a pattern hunter. So if I see things over and over again, that's when I speak to it. And more recently, it's like, oh my gosh, these patterns have been going on for over, well over a decade for me now. Now I can put them in a more written, permanent form. So um, it's really my interaction with people. So sometimes people will message me and say, "What does this mean?" I'm like, first of all, you're asking me such a vague question. Like, I really want to educate people that we're not just talking about conditions, we're talking about your individual experience of a condition. Just like there's different practitioners and they operate differently, different conditions present differently in your body and they affect you differently. So, two people, one condition, one can be like absolutely fine and just lives life, and the other one's absolutely just paralyzed by it.
Yeah.
So
So
it's like, what's the story? What's the conditioning that has you having this experience?
mm-hmm.
So my intuition relies on interaction and being able to pick up the patterns and the language and being able to read the body and also see the shifts in people's energy. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, unfortunately, you can't just text me something and that I interpret it.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. I was just really curious because I don't think I've ever, yeah, I just haven't heard that part of it before.
I
Yeah,
saw a funny reel
yeah.
on Instagram the other day, and it was a vet who said, he'll get a message when a client asks me, my dog hasn't eaten for 3 days. What do you think's wrong with him? And sends a photo, and it's so funny. He's then like getting the photo, putting a syringe into the photo, putting the photo under the X-ray, and it's like, I need to see the dog. I need to examine the dog.
I know it's again like outsourcing that power, isn't it? And just hoping that someone else really has all the answers. Probably
Yeah,
part of it too. Yeah, I love the pattern. What did you say? Pattern hunter.
yeah.
I love that because I feel like I do the same thing with the similar work I do and see like consistent patterns, which I'm sure we can talk on soon because I'd love to hear what you see a lot of in this day and age. In terms of the work you do, can you explain to the listeners a little bit about how emotions actually get stored or impact our physical body? I know that's a very big question, and the listeners know that I'm all about this. I've spoken on this many times, but how would you describe that to somebody?
Yeah, sure. So I have this spiel that I, share to put my work in a nutshell. So what I say is that you will move through life, you will have experiences, you will have highs and you will have lows. And so all of these experiences, including for some traumas, are associated with emotion. Okay. And all of these emotions want to be felt and expressed or processed at the time or very soon after an event. And I feel like the reason why we store emotions in our body, why they start to manifest as undesirable things, is because of two reasons. So the first one is that we don't know how to process our emotions. It wasn't modeled to us. Maybe celebration wasn't modeled to us, but also, to be sad and just have a space held wasn't modeled to us. The second reason is that we live in a very busy, masculine driven world. Do, be active. And we find it inconvenient to actually have emotional expression or discharge from our experiences. So we say, oh, we'll do that later. And then later never comes. And
Mm.
so your body has this amazing ability to compensate, and it stores these emotions waiting for later, waiting for when you rest, waiting for when you go on that
Mm-hmm.
holiday. And everyone has a different capacity to be able to compensate. But what happens is when you're compensating, your body is fine. Nothing's wrong, right? But it's dealing with it. When I use this emotional cup metaphor, so all these little events, positive and negative, but I like to focus on the negative because a lot of people don't give space to it. It builds up, and then you get right up to here, and it can be just the most mundane event that tips you over, or it can be down here and it's a huge event, and the spillage of your emotional cup is like, oh my gosh, all the stuff like stored from the past. And the spillage can come out as undesirable manifestations, which can be your physical issues like low back pain, migraines, period pain, skin rashes, psoriasis, eczema, all these kinds of things that affect your body, digestive issues, cancer. Um, but it can also be other than physical, which is like mental imbalances, severe anxiety and depression that actually stops you from functioning in daily life or
Mm-hmm.
really impacting your daily life. It can be fears and irrational phobias. Um, it can be the behavioral stuff like eating disorders,
Mm-hmm.
controlling your environment, addiction to sex, drugs, alcohol, retail therapy, OCD. And the energetic and spiritual stuff I say is like, hey, look at what's going on in your job, look at what's going on in your relationships. Do you keep on attracting the same friends or the same toxic, abusive relationships? And then spiritually, I say it's when people are constantly going, why is this happening to me? And it's like, oh, you just have to switch one word to why is this happening for me? And that can change so much for you. It's like curiosity of like, why is this happening for me? What is my energetic frequency that is attracting this? And physical, I often feel like is the last way the world is trying to communicate with us. Our environment is trying to communicate to us. Like I look and I see how much the environment, my animals, the things and the stories that I'm hearing that are happening to other people are messages for me. And if I really don't listen to them and stay curious, that's when my physical body will speak to me. So the physical issues I feel like are like the last thing.
The last straw on the
Yeah.
camel's back. Yeah, and the way you describe it, I've described on here before, more in the sense of a stressor being either emotional or physical. But the cup analogy is the same kind of thing. It's that breaking point where it's a message trying to get, well, a symptom trying to get across a message.
I say to people, stress is mental, physical, emotional, it's physiological as well.
Mm,
So getting a virus and actually being impacted by it, because we've always got viruses around, it's usually stress that makes us susceptible, emotional or physical, like being burnt out.
mm,
Physiological stress can be a pregnancy, and some
mm,
people do trigger autoimmune conditions from just getting a flu.
mm.
So we've got to look at beyond mental stress because, as I said, like for me, I didn't feel mentally stressed, but clearly I was in some way.
Yeah, I mean, I think you probably remember parts of my story. I had chronic pain conditions. And I actually remember on the podcast we did together, I feel like because I had a pelvic pain condition, you actually said something around relationships. And at the time, I had never really, because at that time I'd actually recovered, I was out the other side. It didn't really resonate so much. But on reflection, there were a few things that I traced back to later down the track. So I thought I'd just share that with you, Jin, because I do understand now about the womb space, the pelvic area, and how important that is for females and the sorts of energy we carry. But yeah, that was quite an aha moment for me too.
Awesome. I love hearing that. And that's been part of my journey is just speak the truth. It's not going to land for everyone and sometimes I push people away, but because I've been doing this for so long, I have people circle back years, even now decades later, a decade
Mm-hmm.
later. And I'm almost coming up to decades later, but where people say, you know what, Jen, that thing that you said, it lands. And so it's having that trust in that and knowing that it comes from my heart. So thank
Yeah.
you for sharing.
Yeah, no, thank you for saying that because I'm also learning to do the same as well. That letting go of responsibility, of having the perfect answer, and just trusting that whatever you give in that moment, with conversation is the right thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, no, that was a really good aha moment. So I'm actually curious, just before we speak a bit more about actual processing of emotions, do you tend to see like well, you do see patterns, I'm sure, but do you tend to see the same things in 2025? Like, are there common things that are coming up consistently that you can really see a pattern for in clients?
Yeah, for some things, definitely. But what I am now trying to teach people more so, because I love metaphysics, but I say that metaphysics is actually still like metaphysical meanings, as in what is the emotional meaning behind this condition or having this body part ache.
Mm,
But I feel like that's very superficial and it's just the entry point into the mind body connection. Because, yes, there are some things that are very consistent, but I actually don't think it serves someone to attach to that because that's where people say, "Oh, you're connecting this to abuse or you're connecting this to the mother relationship." But I now know from seeing so many clients, it's all about actually finding their individual experience where that emotion first arose. And that is how we process emotions. We process the event and then we allow the emotions to be felt and experienced in that moment. So for me now, I've actually stopped. There's a few that I share on social media,
mm,
but
mm.
really what I want to let people know is, hey, we've got to find out your individual story.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, that makes total sense. And everybody is so unique. And even what you said around the same diagnosis, different experience of the symptoms or the diagnosis, I think when I see it with my clients, they might come with one label and they say, does that other person have this? Do they have those sorts of symptoms? I'm like, you're given a label with your own life experience, your own symptoms. There might be some crossover, but it can be completely different as well. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would love people to move away from these diagnoses and labels. And sometimes, I'll be sharing with a client, it's like, well, you've just gone to a specialist and you've gotten a very vague diagnosis. And actually, if it's that kind of diagnosis, I'm pretty sure you've actually had it your whole life. But the question is, why did it start giving you pain in your teens? Why did it start giving you pain in your 30s? And it's
Mm,
that whole thing of you might have the gene, but what is the thing that pulls the trigger? And hopefully we can create an environment where the trigger never gets pulled. And
mm,
so we don't need to live in fear of the genes or what we inherit, but actually it's up to us to break the patterns.
mm. Yeah, completely. I've just got a side question coming in. When you said around why we don't necessarily process emotions in that moment because of the pace of life and not knowing how to do that or being taught how to do that, do you think that's the same in the Western world as it is the Eastern world? The East.
Mm. Yeah, interesting. So I definitely feel like it is slightly different. I look at my way I view death and how I've been brought up in my family around death and been to a couple of my grandparents' funerals. It's funny because I only remember my mum's mum, her funeral. That's all I remember of her, and how it was like a lot of ceremony in Asian culture around death. And then I remember when I was in my 20s going to my dad's mum's funeral. And it was like a 7-day celebration. It was really a get together. It was incredible. So, yeah, there was emotion, but that's my upbringing around death. And it's funny because I was just thinking the other day, because I do work with people towards end of life as well. And sometimes I need my clients to remind me if they're talking about someone who has passed away, because I just see that we can still communicate to them even though they're on the other side, because we're all souls and having a human experience, and they're no longer having the human experience unless they're reincarnated. Anyway, that's I'm going off.
It's a whole other conversation. Yeah.
But yeah, I do think it's different culturally. And it can be to the detriment culturally as well. And it's interesting because some people are born in certain countries, and as they grow to know themselves more, they start to question, is this country, culture, and environment suited for me? Who am I surrounding myself with? Are they limiting me or are they helping me grow? And we all know that, like, when you go to Asia, there's just this chaos and there's these horns beeping, but it's not aggressive like it is in the
Mm-hmm.
Western, and they just sort themselves out without a lot of these traffic lights. And In Bali, if you go to Ubud, it's like every single week there's this day where like no one, everyone's shut down and they have all these festivals, and it's a culture.
Yeah, I completely
Mm.
agree. Yeah, I was just curious about that because I just think about, the rising rates of chronic illness, mental health, as I know it in the Western world, but I'm sure there's different challenges in other cultures as well. So it's just really just interesting. So if we move into the like actual releasing emotions, uh, yeah, do you want to explain a little bit about not necessarily the process that you take clients through, but just elements of what that actually involves?
Yeah, yeah. Now, this is a really great question. And, as I said before, I find it really difficult to actually share the process. Like, I do have this step by step process. And I believe that whenever we're learning some sort of new skill set, whether it be in the emotional world or in our work or in our hobbies, is like it's best to follow a structure and then we find our flow. It's best to be led a little bit and then we find we can lead ourselves. Um, but with emotional work, I think we're on the same page that it's like, hey, you can only work on yourself with what you see. And sometimes it is, well, sometimes I think if you're after real transformation, it's about working with someone who can see beyond, just processing emotions and see what your potential is. However, it is a good question because a lot of people I work with tend to have tried many things and they're like, what is the difference? So for me, my release process, it's come out of experience and patterns of working with people, but it's a 4-step process that involves verbal dialogue. And it's the verbal dialogue aspect that's really important. And we can release on people that trigger us. That's like the most basic form. Most people are like, oh, yeah, that person annoyed me the other day. And we don't want to wait till it gets really big and nasty. All right. But most people feel guilty for processing negative emotions, thinking that they're dwelling in the negative and that's what they're going to manifest. But the reality is that you're already manifesting it in these undesirable circumstances in your body or in your external life because you're not processing it out of your body. So it's a verbal dialogue process. It does require you to speak because your voice has got vibration and frequency. But there's specific prompts for you to follow depending on who or what you're releasing on. And it involves you being able to get everything out, like all the nastiness, all the criticism, all the judgment, all the things that we're told that we shouldn't express, but you have this safe space for it. Again, I do want to note that we do sometimes have to release on positive experiences because it's such a culture that we don't celebrate our
So
successes or
true.
when we buy the house or when we buy the new car or when we get a pay rise. And
Mhm.
again, having groups where you can celebrate this is really important. But so many people get stumped thinking, oh my gosh, this is actually really hard to do a positive release. So sometimes I have clients that come into groups and then just one round, they're just focusing on positive releases. And sometimes I have to like pull my client out and go, right, these negative releases, we just need to have a bit of a break and a breather and let's go to the positive. Anyway, so it involves you being able to say everything that you want to say that you didn't feel safe to say at the time. And it then involves you having to take on more of a listening role. And I think that's what we really do when we're triggered. We're so ready to defend ourselves and be right and make someone else wrong. But if we can actually get ourselves into a place of understanding and compassion and listen and understand that that person has got their own experiences, that is where we receive our messages. When we can hold someone in their power, when we can know that they're emotionally intelligent and that they can actually see stuff for us that we're not willing to see yet.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, this receiving is where we get our messages for moving forward, our affirmations that actually come from within versus a coach just telling you this is what you've got to do. Because it might be true that that's what you've got to do, but no one can make you change. You have to change from within. And sometimes you have to hear the messages so many times, like I did for a couple of years, before it's just like, oh my God, maybe she was right. Maybe like it is what I have to do. And then
Yeah.
the third part of the fourth part of the process or the third part of the verbal dialogue aspect, it's not relevant for everything, but it's the younger self, it's the inner child conversation. Because quite often when we have been in those experiences, we will ask these questions like, am I ever going to find a relationship? Am I going to find a better job? Is this ever going to get better? And things did get better in your life, but that inner child, that younger version of yourself hasn't been able to heal. Like the questions still haven't been answered. So you get to go back and you get to answer them. And, I have gotten into describing the process and letting you know that there's these prompts. But as you listen, you're in your head and you're trying to work it
Mhm.
out.
Mhm. No, that's an
And
individual thing.
yeah, it's got to be an experiential thing. And you've got to be willing to go through this discomfort again, like learning anything new. I was just walking down here to record the podcast thinking, gosh, people invest years at university, thousands of dollars and so many hours of time. And yet
Yeah.
they come into a course and they expect that in one day they're going to be perfect at it. And like, gosh, it just reveals so much about personality and where we hold ourselves back. So, yeah, it's not an easy process and it depends where you're at on your journey. Some people drop into it straight away, but I say, the more open you can be to it, the more you surrender to it and trust the process, because you've heard all my like transformational stories. These are the people who are just like, I'm all in. I'm just going to follow your lead. But then eventually they don't rely on my guidance. They lead themselves. And it's just the sticky things that we work on, the stuff that they can't quite access, because anything that's challenging, the body will want to protect you from. Until
Mm.
you build the trust, like you were talking about the momentum, until
Mm.
you build the trust that you're capable and that you're confident, and you actually get excited about the challenges because you know that there's a message behind them. But anyway,
Mhm.
that's it in a nutshell.
No, that makes total sense. Total sense. And having that space to get that dialogue out, I think is it, in my head intellectually. Again, I haven't gone through the experience, but I can understand how that would work and releasing, because it goes back to that just pushing through, pushing through, pushing through, and then not having that space as well.
Yeah, and also I think verbal dialogue is really important because in a safe space, and so when I talk about safe space, it might just be one to one with me, or for some people, it's in a group, and it's like, oh my gosh, these people aren't judging me in this group and cheering me on. And it's like, oh gosh, I want to have a release like that. But it's like we're constantly looking for permission to say what we want to say. And beyond releasing is we have to be able to communicate. We have to be able to speak up for ourselves. And the process, what it reveals for me is how much people don't know what they need. Like if I ask someone, what do you want? They're like, I don't know. It's like, well, do you want support? How do you want support? And I think that so many people expect people to mind read, or, they have a way that they would support and they're like, why don't they do that? It's like, well, that's not honoring their personality. They are not they're not you. And so your responsibility is to know how you want to be supported and to be able to request that and to actually handle that some people won't be able to give that to you. But you don't just stop asking, and you trust that there's support available out there for you. But this eventually translates to feeling safe in communicating to anyone, people that you don't know, into the online space and so on.
Yeah, that, oh, my brain's firing off in different directions, but that ability to, first of all, even identify your desires and your requests and your wants, I think is something that I've been moving through, but I also see in my clients as well. Where do you think that comes from, that not knowing? Do you think it's fear? Do you think it's perhaps being turned down, or do you think it's more just not connecting to ourselves?
Yeah, I think it's all of the above. I think some of the common things that I see is that, as a kid where you're limitless and you're like, I want to do this, I want to do that. And I think that children are just naturally emotionally expressive. I mean, you look at babies, they just like have their tantrum, they cry, and then they're just like bright eyed and bushy tailed. But as parents, as adults, we then just go, this isn't appropriate. We start to impose and we start to limit their minds. And so it can be that you even told a teacher, like, oh, I want to do this. And actually, the experience for you to process is then saying, well, that's not realistic. I was just having a conversation with a friend the other day and I caught myself say, well, is it realistic? I'm not even going to continue because, like, I live in an unrealistic world. But it still came up for me. And so
Yeah.
I think it can be those experiences which also ties in with fear of failure, fear of success. And quite often people just dance between fear of failure and fear of success, and so they don't move. And then sometimes we will look at people in the online space and we'll be like, right, it's just about the structure, or we'll read the book and hope that we get the transformation. I mean, I think books are just to affirm what we are to embody, or, it's a way to encourage us to take that step. But it's, yeah, it's our capacity. Like, do we have the emotional capacity to hold the success that we desire? And you're being taught to hold challenge, which I actually think, is easier than success. And then it goes into the transition of celebration. Are you in spaces where people celebrate money, your milestones, your evolution of yourself? Because there is a lot of nasty criticism and judgment, particularly around women.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh my gosh, who does she think she is? Look at her. So much judgment and criticism. And honestly, you just have to have the capacity to hold that and know it's not yours.
Yeah.
It's not that it ever goes away.
I think what you said around the fear of success being probably more prevalent or even a bigger thing than fear of failure.
Yeah.
You said something like that, that I also believe that to be true. Do you have a way of explaining that to people that haven't come across this idea before around the fear of success?
I love to talk to people about their individual story based on their questions. So I'm very much a responder.
Mm.
So I can see the potential for people, but again, it's no good for me to say, well, you could do this, you could do that. Sometimes I overwhelm people, or they'll come back and go, Jen, okay, I've made the step. Now I'm ready. Um, but I think it's the context, and sometimes people don't realize they're in the fear of failure and the fear of success. So when I'm presented with their block or their resistance that they want coaching on, that's when they're ready to hear whether or not they're in fear of failure or fear of success. That's when it lands, and it's like, oh my gosh, like I am the one holding myself back.
Yeah. And it comes back to that safety as well, doesn't it? That not taking the next step out of what is safe, what is getting your needs met, often unconsciously.
Yeah. And actually, we need the safety and security to actually have these ideas. And then we actually do get thrown into a little bit of a stretch. Like I say, we want to stretch, but we don't want to break our nervous system.
Mm.
Um, but we have this desire to grow. And then when we stretch and we find comfort in that, then we get back to safety and security. And it's just nature's cycle that you might find that a little bit boring. And in that space, your ideas can land, and then you go for another stretch. So it's important to have a desire. And when you achieve that desire, realize what you're capable of and not feel guilty. So many people feel guilty of achieving what they wanted and then wanting something extra on top
Mm.
of that. It's like, totally. That is actually, you need to just be around the right people who are like, yeah, I want you to have the next level desire because you realize what you're capable of.
Yeah, that whole thing around judgment and who is she? Let's say it's a female thing, not entirely, but what you said before, I
Mm.
think rings true. It's it's what you said around it not going away. You just have to learn to tolerate that and move with that. I think is really interesting and also true because a lot of people can't be comfortable with other people's successes.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, again, social media, that's where I share my stuff. It's like one person says a bad comment or you start advertising. Tell you, when you start advertising, the comments are rife.
Oh, can you imagine?
And you actually just go, oh my gosh, but look at how many people liked this, are responding and engaging. And I'm focusing on like the not even 1% of these people. And so, yeah, it's crazy. And I've felt myself do that, but I've always got some sort of support, whether it be group, one-to-one, people that I work with where I know it's a safe space to share. But it almost gets to a point where you're just like, it's not even worth giving this voice or energy anymore. It's just like, hide that comment. Unless, we do have to check in if we're just hiding it because we're not actually willing to educate.
Hmm.
But there's like the dumb troll
Mm.
comments where it's just
Oh
like, don't even go into that.
yeah, yeah. And if you think about like the general population and perhaps where those types of people are spending their time, just actually leaving those comments, it's like, gosh, you need to find another hobby.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah,
Yeah.
unfortunately, I see so many people like they get one bad comment and they're like, I'm done. I'm like, oh gosh, no. And this is why emotional work and working with the right people is so important to support you in the journey. And support is very feminine energy. Like, we're
Mm.
not designed to do it ourselves.
Yeah. Well, we may as well talk about that now because I've had, as I was just mentioning before we jumped on this podcast, a real exploration around the balancing of the masculine feminine energy, and found that I had was operating very much in a feminine to a point where a lot of stresses and traumas came on, armored my body, closed down, operating in a masculine way. And it's been a real rediscovery for me in the last few years. And support has been another one because for me personally, as someone who's, I would say, big Aries energy, naturally very independent, I have also come to that realization that it is impossible to build a business by yourself. And there's also no shame in receiving as well.
Mm, yeah. And it's funny because it's a personality type, a constitution type that's prone to skin and acne. And,
Mhm.
I was very much the same. It's like, I can do it better. I want to do things fast as well. And so it is about really picking the right people. And, I've had this experience over and over again working with a team. And, sometimes I outsource and contract a little bit of my stuff. I'm in the midst of that, and I have to pre-warn people. It's like I move fast, so you got to make sure I'll pay you. You got to have space for me.
Yeah, I hear you. I don't know about you, but one of my things that I've had this internal, I wouldn't say battle, I've really come to some form of acceptance, is that I do get bored easily. And I thought maybe that was just some block I had, but I've actually come to accept that I do. Like I move fast, I get bored easily, and that's okay.
Yeah, yeah, just really knowing yourself, because I'm the same, Bianca. I feel like people are like, oh my gosh, you need to slow down. And I feel like people are waiting for me to burn out. I'm like, don't worry, I know what burnout looks like, and I'm going nowhere near it. But I know myself, like if it triggers you that you go fast, like you need to learn about, if I go fast, then you need to learn about yourself and be grounded in that energy and not affected by me.
That whole thing around using others to reflect back onto us as well is really important, because I can imagine you're very strong in your work as well. So I can imagine that that would reflect back to people what they need to work on within.
Yeah.
Yeah. With the masculine feminine energy thing, is there anything that you've really noticed, whether it be in your work or just in general, some themes coming up?
Yeah, so this has been coming up over the last few weeks, and I love having been consistent in my world to particular programs because I have seen how they've evolved and how more and more structure and concepts land for me. And the most recent one, through my own experience as well, just in the last couple of months with writing, is this realization of people, you know, being in like the work mode, or what we kind of demonizes the hustle mode, right? The masculine, the drive, the doing, putting the work in. And they're so unhappy with that. And then they're hearing people talk about the feminine and the flow and having baths and lean back. These are
Soft
all
life.
valuable. Yeah. Yeah. And then they're like feeling really guilty because they're like having a Netflix binge, or, realizing that they've got a whole day where they can do nothing, but they feel so guilty that they're doing nothing, or that they're just sitting down and reading a book and feeling like I should work. So what's come up for me is like, oh my gosh, these people that are working at extreme ends of the spectrum, and they're
Mm.
not happy in the masculine drive and they're not happy in the feminine. So they're not happy. And it's again, it's like
All around.
yeah, it's like fear of failure, fear of success. You just stay stuck. And so, through my own experience of like writing recently, and I did get my book written really quickly, like within 4 or 5 weeks. I did not expect that. Is I found myself in masculine mode, but prior to this, I was in very feminine mode. For the last 3 months of 2024, I had two foals due, and I wanted to be there for the birth. I wanted to be there to give them the right upbringing. I mean, some people would say, you don't need to do anything, Jin, like just leave them alone. But I wanted to be present with them. So I didn't launch anything new. I just had some one to one clients. I had my groups. They were easy, they were ticking along. And I realized that actually, in that space that I intentionally created, that's where I had the idea for the book to land. And then a whole bunch of interesting circumstances happened around me for me. And it only took me about 24 to 48 hours to move through it and go, what's the opportunity in this? And it's like, oh, I have space to actually write this book. And I got into masculine mode because you actually need to do something to write the book.
Mm.
It's creative, which is a mix of masculine and the feminine. But I was up early in the morning, and I was up sometimes from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. because I just owned that I know that that's my creative time. But I also know that I cannot do this for weeks on end. And I knew that this book was not going to go for months or years, right? And so I had moments of thinking, oh gosh, this is like, I can't sustain this. And then my body started to speak to me and I started to feel anxiety. And I share this with my groups really openly because they feel like, well, when I've got anxiety, when I feel like this, when I'm out of routine, then this is not healthy. And I'm like, well, this is how I create stuff, but I've just learned to own it and understand myself. And now I'm back into, well, the next thing comes up when you're learning something new. It's like, oh, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. But I don't have the anxiety anymore. But I say I transmute the anxiety by sharing with my groups. So I'm not trying to
Yeah.
hide it. I'm not
Yeah.
trying to say that I'm like super emotionally regulated, but I allow myself to peak and I allow myself to come down. And
Hmm.
so, if I want to create and do work and I feel tired, well, I've created space and time to have a nap and do that work later. So it's like really listening to your body. So what I'm trying to say is that I've been here and every now and then I go there. And I think people make themselves wrong for doing the work. And it's like, but no,
Hmm.
you need the masculine to
Hmm.
then be able to flow. Because like once I've put the work into my book, once I've put the work into my launch, it gets to evolve the next time. It gets to be different. And you have the confidence because you've actually learned a new skill. So I'm trying to teach my clients to recognize where they're at. And, when you're in the masculine push, it's not a bad thing. It's creative energy, it's healthy anger. But during that time, it's not always a priority for you to process your emotions. So it is making sure that either you schedule regular time. And I did find myself in a moment where I was like, it usually takes me 5 minutes to fall asleep. But after this had all wound down and I had written majority of the book, I had to like force myself to just stay in bed one afternoon for an hour and a half, which is so unusual because I knew that I needed to rest. But it's
Hmm.
like we just go, oh, but it usually takes me 5 minutes. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, if it's more built up, it's going to take longer. So it's, now I'm watching movies on Netflix again and I'm enjoying it. So it's like you've got to be happy with where you're at and work and then work with that, knowing that there is a different way. So it's like
Yes.
letting yourself go through the cycles and not expect everything to be same and super calm and regulated all the time. Like regulation means you can go up and you can come down.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Just allowing yourself to be in the certain energies and certain seasons, I think coming in and out of them is really healthy. Because, yeah, definitely, I think this whole conversation around feminine energy, which we both know is probably less valued and validated in the society, which is changing. I think that's led people to having this assumption that it's all about soft life and, feel your feelings and don't do any work. And it's like, that's not reality. Like,
No, exactly. And I catch people when they go, I'm just going to go with the flow. And like, did you realize what you just said? And actually, this is not going to serve you to just go with the flow. It's like we need intentionality. We need to have some structure to flow from. That is just the reality. Um, there's something else that came up for me with what you were saying, but it's just escaped my mind. It'll come back if it needs to.
it will circle back. Yeah, it's an interesting conversation, and I guess we have the luxury of being able to create time and energy on our own terms a little bit more, being self-employed. But what about those people that have the family life, the work life? They've got a lot of things going on. Is there anything you'd recommend or anything you'd like for them to sort of sit with and think about
Yeah.
in the way that they manage their energy?
Yeah. So interesting you talk about the luxury of, and I love the luxury of having this time, but I think that for both of us, we
We
have
created it.
we've created it, we've made it happen.
Mm.
And that's what I was going to say about the feminine is the hardest thing, feminine is the experience for me. It's the energetics, it's experiential, and you got to wait to get there and then be coached on what comes up, because so many people feel like when I get the time, when I get the space and the rest, then I will feel this way, which is actually not the right mentality. But anyway, you got to go experience it. The most difficult thing when this feminine space and time happens for you is to actually trust it, trust in the nothingness. And so for me, that was like, okay, I'm just not going to launch anything big. I'm going to spend time with the foals. And that's where my ideas were born. So in terms of, family, employment, work life, and so on, first of all, I think it's understanding yourself. I don't think that everyone is designed to be an entrepreneur. Everyone could be if they wanted to be, but the thing is they've got to have that drive to work for themselves. And another thing that I've been speaking about to my groups recently is that when you work for someone, you have imposed deadlines. You are being led, you're being told what to do. And for some phases and stages of our life, it's the easy option to take. And there's nothing wrong with that, because people like you and me do need people working for us to support us. And when you understand yourself, sometimes, that's just part of your journey and you can enjoy it and you can absolutely love employment or contracting. And there are some people where actually, it is in their true nature to be more behind the scenes. So understanding your personality, your constitution, just like whatever profiling you use, I think pulling on different ones that speak to you as to where you're at is really important. For some of my clients, like I have worked with clients, not just in business, but it's around the sole purpose is to be a mother, but actually to stay present and really enjoy and cherish like each of these moments. Sometimes it is to have a family, knowing that, it will enrich the life of your family. Um, I guess like what I want to encourage people, if you're in employment as well, I work with people in employment, is how can you shift from the mentality of feeling overworked and underpaid to actually knowing your worth and value and finding employment that aligns with you, that, there's this equal energetic exchange of you help rise up and they help you rise up as well. So you're all building something bigger together. So it's not to say that being in employment is not the ultimate goal. It is for some people. And some people get paid really well in employment. And I've had a lot of clients that when they work on themselves, they just get offered pay rises. Sometimes it is about having the conversation to have the pay rise, because there's such a link between employment or your work and career and your personal relationships. Is that so many people just ditch the relationship, ditch the job, but the thing that you haven't resolved in that interaction will just follow you to the next thing.
So
And this
true.
is, moving into the communication piece. So, I was very intentional about having Violet and the way I wanted to parent. And I think motherhood can be a really amazing transition. I was just like, I'm having 12 months off. And I stuck to my guns. It's like, Gav, you need to work this out. And breastfeeding and co-sleeping and just attachment parenting and just being very present for her. And actually, that's where all of my ideas came to fruition of like, exactly how am I going to implement this? And I can't know exactly how, but I can create an intention and then other things beyond what I think possible can land. So yeah, it's recognizing where you're at, accepting that it's part of your journey. And if you're not happy about it, you can do something about it.
Yeah, that's so true. No, I fully agree with everything you're saying. Um, cool. Well, I'm curious to know if we go back to that releasing emotions, is there any stories, any transformations that you'd love to share? Some clients, I don't know if you call them clients, that have had big shifts and you feel like inspiring those listening with these transformations.
So many.
I know, and I
Yeah.
know you have because I see it always pop up. But is there one or two that really stick with you?
Yeah. And so there's actually 14 really key stories that are going in my book. So you can hear the behind the scenes. But there's one person that's coming to my mind, probably because she's just messaged me. And there's another one where you can download chapter 3 and you can read the full story. So I'll tell you the story of Kirsten and Robin, and they do let me use their names, and I've recorded podcasts with them or on behalf of them. So Kirsten is a woman who she had two kids, and she actually had about five miscarriages, and she really wanted a third baby to add to her family. Like it really that felt like her sole purpose, just to be this mother of three kids. And she was 43 at the time when, or in her 40s when we met, and she was just so drawn to this emotional work. It was actually her functional doctor that was really like talking about the emotions, and then we just crossed paths at the right time. And she was just so like very humble, very just quiet, but she did the work. And um, she actually got pregnant whilst we were working together in a group, and she had her sixth miscarriage during that time. But she still went on to work with me one to one, and I helped her facilitate other stuff. I don't go into the details of what it is because it's all unique. But she was told by doctors that she was too old. She was told by IVF specialists that she would need to have all this medication, like injections and so on, because she had this gene thing. And she's just like, but there's something in me that tells me no. And anyway, we went through the processing, advised some different things, and she really was allowed herself to be led and surrender to it. She got pregnant, and then the next mission was like to hold the pregnancy and all of the fears around, losing
Mm.
this baby, because she had such evidence that she had lost these third babies. Even a clairvoyant told her that three was not on the cards. So she had to release on that. She had to
Wow.
release on all these people. And she
Mm.
just fully trusted her body. She now has an almost 2 year old, her third baby. And she's still like, I don't know if I still can't believe this. And the only work, like, I mean, she had a beautiful functional doctor who's since retired, but she really credits the emotional work to this. And so I love sharing her story, and the full story will be in my book, and I have shared it on behalf of Kirsten. Like, I think she's incredible, and she was someone who thought, well, these people are getting these results. I don't know if it's possible for me. But I just love her willingness to go deeper.
Mm.
The second story, I'll keep this one brief, but it's also really powerful. And this one, you can download it and you can read it. And I've done a
Mm.
podcast with Robin as well. Um, but I say to people, this emotional work doesn't prevent you from having challenges, but you trust that the challenges, you're energetically aligned to these challenges. They're for a reason. But I actually shared her testimonial from when she joined my group, and I totally forgot where she was, where it was like at a point where she didn't want to live life anymore. She was in the corporate world, she was doing everything right, and she came in to process her emotions. And within a handful of weeks, I think it was 6 or 8 weeks, she's like, "Hey, I'm here to live." And then 6 months into, we did ongoing work in a group, she gets diagnosed with breast cancer. And even just like finding the lump was really interesting because it was very deep down and it wasn't detected by normal things. And when most people would go, I'm out of here, I've got to focus on all the fix it and the conventional and whatever alternative I want to embrace, she actually lent into the emotional work even more. She's like, I know I have to do this. So we continued working with one another through diagnosis. She was in a group through remission and no evidence of disease. But if you get a chance to listen to Robin either on the Cancer Masterclass or in the podcast, she's just so beautiful to listen to. Like, the energy comes through in her words. I'm just so captivated by her stories. I can listen to her all day. But it was her approach, and she was someone brought up with naturopathy and homeopathy and did not think she was going to go near chemo radiation, but she embraced it all and the support. And she was able to have really open conversations with her support team. So even though they didn't agree, and even though she knew that this is what they were going to do, it was still important for her to express what she
Mhm.
wanted and how she felt with it. And we always joke that the practitioners she attracted, the three main ones, their names were Warrior, Faith, and Chi. And like, that's how we just know that
That,
everything is in alignment, everything is going to be okay. We get these little signs. So those are two really powerful stories that I have shared. I love celebrating these people because sometimes they're like, really? And when I was asking for permission to share these case studies in my book, these people were like in tears, feeling like they're reading about someone else.
mm.
they're just like you and me, and they're such an inspiration.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing, Jen. I'm glad you brought up that second story, because I was actually going to say another thing I wanted to tell you is I really admire your courage for speaking on the emotions that come into cancer. And Justine Laidlaw, I think you may have crossed paths with her. Yeah, we recorded it together, but it was really like it was weird. It was glitchy. The audio, I think her thing was on mute. Anyway, we have to re-record, but we spoke a lot on this, and I'm sure it will happen when the time is right. But having seen the way that we currently approached the treatment plan and what is expected, and then the courage that these people have to go against that and voice their own way of doing things. I think, like, hats off to your client, number one, but I think there is a lot of support there for people that are navigating the cancer journey that want to explore this area. I think it's a lot harder to come by, but hopefully
Yeah.
things are changing.
Thank you. It is definitely scary because I know it's controversial, and I do see, especially in the cancer space, that it can be challenging for people to do the emotional work, which is why I actually would encourage you to start the journey before that. And Robin is just um, she's such an inspiration because she did the work beforehand, which I think made it easier for her to, she wasn't taking on something new. She was just deepening what already existed within her.
Yeah, definitely. That's so inspiring. So these two women are in your book. It
Yes.
is coming out. Can we talk about that a little bit more? So you've finished it. I've seen it's in the works. Yeah,
Yes.
go for it if you'd like to share about that and what's been going on in that area.
Yeah. Oh gosh, it's been so exciting. And I've definitely been in the masculine push and I'm just like fully in the feminine trust as well because
Yeah.
yeah, it's called Healing Beyond the Diagnoses, the emotional work that creates true transformation. And you can replace cancer, autoimmune disease. It's all the same because what is in common is unprocessed emotions. And so I never saw myself as a writer, but as I said, I intentionally took this time off last year, not launching anything. And that's where the book idea came up. And I had the capacity, I had the space. And that's why I think I was able to get it written so fast.
Yeah. That's like
um,
lightning speed. What did you say? Like 6 weeks, 4 weeks?
yeah, about 4 or 5 weeks. But of course, it's not over when you write it. It's like, oh my gosh, you got to do a website, you got to promote it, you've got to show up.
Yeah.
That's my biggest lesson. I know you got to show up and tell people what you've got. And I don't even have the book yet. So I've got all the designs. And why I say it's a trust project is because I have decided to create like a limited edition luxury version that's going to come with some group time with me if you get in early enough. And then there is going to be a paperback version, but it's required me to invest quite a significant amount of money. I sent off the final designs to get the limited edition printed, and they're like, the sample is going to cost more to ship than it costs to make. So I've paid $1,100 to get
Oh,
one book
wow.
made.
Oh, wow. It's like the most expensive book you'll probably ever get your hands on.
So I can actually show people. But yeah, I'm getting 222 copies of the really beautiful luxury limited edition printed, and there is going to be a paperback version coming out around May. So yeah, depending on when this comes out, depends on what experience you get to have. But I have led everything from a place of desire and only honoring when the energy comes up, like writing this book. It was a huge learning curve because, as I said, it's not natural for me to write, it's more for me to speak. But I also want my mission this year was to share my message, and a book is one way to do it. And it's really cool because a lot of my clients, they say, "How do we share your work?" Because they know it's not for everyone. And, I want to attract people that are responsible, who not necessarily ready, but just feel drawn in by a feeling. So it feels really good already to have something that my clients are excited to gift to a friend, that it'll feel good even if you don't read it. When you're ready, like the pages will start speaking to you. Or it's like, hey, go and watch the free masterclass. And when you're ready to lead yourself into this space, let's go. And there's such transformation. But yeah, the book, I've just learnt so much, and it's actually helped me articulate what I do in a different way, which caters for different people's learning experiences as well. I have got a lot of fear around the book as well because, emotional work is not something to touch on lightly. I believe it's deep. I believe it does require support. And I hope that everyone takes what they read from books deeper and they actually embody it. I don't want to just be one of those books that people talk about. Like, I want you to do the work, whether it's with me or someone else or with you, Bianca,
Mm.
is like trusting where we're at on the journey and that we will attract the right people. But it is about growth and evolution. So, yeah, it's that I've seen these patterns happen over and over and over again, that there's a risk and there is a place for these patterns to be shared in a more permanent form. But the little introduction that you gave for me, it's like, right, this is going on the book and I can never take it back. What is the future version of myself that will be proud of this? So I actually took some titles away because
Yeah.
I already know I'm telling people a story that it's like, I don't want you to come and work with me for my titles.
Yes.
I just want you to come and work with me because you feel drawn to it, and that's the best place to be. If you come into my world with expectations, you're likely going to be disappointed, and that responsibility is on you.
Yeah, and I did notice that when I was revamping your bio thing that last night. I was like, yeah, she's definitely taken out some labels because you've obviously got a lot of different titles that you have used previously. So I think that new description is really nice. Yeah, and I hope while you were writing the book, you did take time to process a lot of celebrations as well, because I can imagine it would be like a lot of reflection of all the years of work and backing yourself and yeah, really trusting the process and just reading that, writing that, like it must have been a real crazy experience.
Well, I look back on some of my work and my master classes because it's all stuff that I've already taught, but it was just putting it into a different format
Hmm.
that was challenging. And I definitely celebrated with my groups. Like, my groups had no idea that a book was on the cards. And so I talked about having the anxiety that I was waking up with. I transmuted that. And it's like taking this anxious, excitement, nervous energy into, yeah, sharing the experience with my clients. And I'm so happy that that happened because it's brought me back to where a lot of them would be. And oh gosh, I got to talk about this on social media, but I know that strategy is a very small part of what we do, and energy is really what draws people in. So I know that this energy is not going to last. It's an open and it's a closed container, and it takes the masculine work to get it set up, but hopefully this book will just continue to reach the right people. And I use astrology, I use an astrologer, and I have all these things that it's like, this could be a massive success. And I'm also opening it to going nowhere. And that's the thing. It's like, can it go either way? Did I do it for it to become a success? Not necessarily. That would be really cool. But, I'm just going to let this lead me wherever it needs to. And when things come from a place of desire, it like there's just been some crazy energetics at play with this book. Like, it's the limited edition has got 333 pages. The paperback doesn't, because there's actually a bonus that we slotted in that we can do for the one that I'm printing. Um, but it's honestly taken on an identity of its own. And when I lead from desire, that's where I'm at the moment. And I trust these things that don't make sense. That's when everything actually falls into place in the most perfect way possible that I couldn't even expect.
I love that. I hope everyone listening is just taking something from that last bit, because it is trusting in the unknown and doing the thing. Desire is a very powerful force.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yay. Thank you so much, Jen. I feel like I think I've been saying this to all of my last like three interviewees, but I honestly feel like we could talk for hours. People listening are probably getting sick of me saying this, but there are so many other things I'd love to delve into. I know that you have yeah, you've manifested a lot since you've really stepped into this work. So perhaps when we do another episode in the future, I'm gonna just say we're gonna do one, and I'll get you back on and we can talk about that, because I'd love to hear more about that.
I would love to. And yeah, it's been in the last year, it's been very distinct for me that, hey, we start off with processing emotions, but I'm actually just about to go into like a bonus week with my round 9 of release people. And what I'm going to be sharing with them is the steps beyond processing your emotions, because I don't want people to stay there. Like, it's still so valuable, but hopefully we're processing more exciting stuff and we're taking steps forwards, because you get the messages from your emotional releases, and those messages have got to be integrated into your life. And I also feel like, well, that's going to be my second book, but that'll land when it needs to. So I'd love to come on and share the manifestation piece as well and be able to link people back to this episode. So yeah, thanks
Yeah,
for putting that
awesome.
intention out there.
Okay, well, we'll get that sorted. And where can people find you if they are interested in everything you've said today? They want to explore the release work further, perhaps get a copy of your book. Where can they
Yeah.
find you?
Yeah. So as long as I get to stay on social media, because I've had a few warnings, Instagram is where I'm most active, the art of listening to your body. And then you'll be able to find links from there. But I do have a free masterclass called The Missing Link, which I feel like gives you a really good overview to identify where you're at and whether or not you're ready to actually do some deeper work with me. So people can download that. I'll share the link with you. And yeah, I would absolutely love if you jumped on board my book. So there is going to be 2 releases. One is the limited edition copy, which is just going to be an experience in itself, and you get to have some time in a group with me. And then the other one's the paperback, which will be available on Amazon. That's called Healing Beyond the Diagnoses. If you join the waitlist, or I'll make sure the page is still valid, you can download chapter 3 and get a good feel of, yeah, how I operate. So that should be coming out mid-April 2025. And the paperback, May 22nd, is the date that I've got secured for the paperback. But I'll give you the links for that if people are
Yeah,
interested.
how exciting. I'll definitely be getting my hands on that. So I look forward to reading. Yay. Cool. Thank you so much, Jen, for coming. It's been awesome having a chat, having a catch up. It's been far too long. And thank you for sharing all your wisdom.
Thank you so much.